Yeah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You are welcome again on our facilitation exercise on ISL 101 General Introduction to Islam. This is the fourth week, that is, we are on week 4 of this exercise. In our last lesson, we looked at Kalimatu Shahada, the different parts of it, the meaning and other things like that, and the importance. Today we will continue our facilitation by looking at what Hadith and Sunnah is. What is Sunnah and what is Hadith? We look at the concept of Hadith and Sunnah. Then we move further to look at Ijma and Qiyas and some other things that are related to them. So this will be the contents of our discussion on today's facilitation. If you are ready, I'm your regular anchor, Professor Mustafa Adejora Abdurrahim. You are welcome. Okay, you are welcome. My name is Professor Mustafa Adejora Abdurrahim from the Faculty of Arts. So let's move on today's topic. Our intended learning outcome for today, at the end of today's lesson, we expect that you should be able to explain the concise meaning of Sunnah or Hadith. The meaning of Sunnah and Hadith. Then you should be able to explain the basis of Sunnah and Hadith in the Quran. Then, again, we will expect you to be able to trace the meaning and definition of Ijma and Qiyas. Ijma and Qiyas. So, and lastly, you should be able to explain the basis of Ijma and Qiyas. So this one is the definition of Ijma and Qiyas, while this one is the basis for Ijma and Qiyas. The meaning of Sunnah or Hadith now. Sunnah, according to Ibn Durayd, in his book titled Jamhara, that is the name of his book, he defines Sunnah, or he explains Sunnah to mean to fashion a thing or produce it as a model, to fashion something out and use it as a model. So that is the meaning Ibn Durayd gave to the word Sunnah. So the word is derived from the perfect verb sanna, which means setting or fashioning a mode of conduct. Is it to fashion something out as a mode of conduct? That is the meaning of sanna. So, and it is for an example. It shows to be used as an example for others to follow. Anything that we say is a sunnah, so it's something that has to be followed as an example. So the word sunnah predated Islam. That is, it is not Islam that brought that word sunnah. It has been in existence before Islam, and referred to the way of life of the Arabs. So the way of life of the Arabs, even before the advent of Islam, is known as Sunnah. They will say Sunnah of the Arabs, Sunnah of so person. So it predated Islam. That is, it has been in use before the advent of Islam in Arabia. So it should be noted that Sunnah in the Sharia connotes the normative practice, that is the norm, or we say norm, the behavior, certain good behavior that is set up by the prophet, or that was set up by the prophet as a model. When we say something is a model, something to be copied, something that we can emulate, something that we can take as our model, as our way of life. So Hadith, on the other, that is about Sunnah. So let's look at Hadith on the other hand. On the other hand, Hadith literally means a piece of news. Hadatha, you had this, so that is something, a news, a piece of news, that is, or a story, or a report, which is relating to a present or past event. It may be a news of something that is happening now, or something that has happened in the past. So literally, in the ordinary meaning of Hadith means a piece of news or story. So technically, in the use of that word Hadith in Islam, it means the narration of the words and deeds and the tacit approval or disapproval of the Prophet Muhammad. So when we hear Hadith in Islamic terminology, technically. So it refers to the words of the prophet, what the prophet says or said, or his deeds, what he did, the actions he performed. And the tacit approval, when we say tacit, that is silent approval. So maybe somebody does anything or did anything, so the prophet did not object to it, or the prophet did not comment on it. So that shows he is approved of that thing. Because if he disapproves of it, he will tell that person not to do that thing again. So that's what we call tacit approval. That is approval given without making any comment. So now, basis of Sunnah and Hadith in the Quran. Because everything a Muslim does must have a root or the basis from the Quran. So the glorious Quran affirms the Prophet as the best model. In a particular chapter and verse, Allah says, وَلَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. That is, you have the best example in the lifestyle of Prophet Muhammad for you Muslims. So that is a passage in the Quran. So you can research into that on your own and bring it out for me. So it's directed that his behavior, that is, the Quran directed that the behavior of the Prophet and his attitude should not only be strictly obeyed by Muslims, but also be fully emulated. That is, the Quran encourages the Muslims to obey the Sunnah of the Prophet, the way of life or the behavior of the Prophet, whatever he commands, and that we should follow his examples. Now let us classify Sunnah, the classification of Sunnah. Sunnah is classified into three types. There are three types. There are three categories into which we can classify the word Sunnah. Namely, and they are verbal Sunnah, that is qawliya, qawl, verbal, what you utter in your mouth. Then that is one of it. Then the other class of it is action, fi'liya, feel, action. And the third one is tacitly approved, that is takririya. That is what we said earlier on. Either his speech or his actions or what he approved tactically, tacitly, that is without making any comment or whatever. So the verbal, which is qawliya, the verbal sunnah, is the expressions of the Prophet on any subject. So whatever he says about anything, we will take it as the sunnah to qawliya. Then the other one is sunnah to fi'liya, that is whatever he did practically, maybe his practical deed, what you saw him doing, like the way he prayed, he stood up, he bowed down, and he prostrated. That is practical aspect. He performed those actions. So that is what we call sunnah al-fi'liya. Then the third one is tacitly approved sunnah, that is takririya, which consists of the acts and sayings of the companions which came to the knowledge of the Prophet, and of which he either kept mute or approved the action. So whatever his companions did and the information got to the Prophet and he didn't condemn it is what we call takririya, sunnah takririya, that is tacitly approved sunnah. So let us go to ijma now. Ijma can be defined as the consensus of opinion of the companion of the Prophet. You see, when the Sahaba of the Prophet, when they came together to give a conclusion, to conclude a consensus, so on a particular matter, so is what is called ijma. That is, the Sahaba of the Prophet, the companion of the Prophet, they came together and take a decision on a particular issue. And specifically when the Prophet did, if any such issue, if the Prophet did not talk about it, so but they now came together, all the companions, they came together after the demise of the Prophet, they came together and now gave a consensus opinion. So that is what is called ijma for short. So it could be seen as the agreement of learned scholars. So that is men of ijtihad, those learned scholars who now worked or concluded on a particular issue. So their opinion is known as ijma. Ijma is an agreement, you see, just to simplify it. It's an agreement of the Islamic community on a religious point. So any issue that came up under the religion, So when the scholars in that environment, in that community, now came together to arrive at a conclusion, this is how we agree that we should do it. That is what is called ijma. In another expression, ijma is a consensus of opinion of the person's competent. So that's just another meaning of another explanation, meaning the same thing. That is the agreement arrived at by scholars. Ijma is a unanimous agreement. You have seen it's a unanimous agreement of scholars. So now the other one is qiyas. Qiyas is said to be that the Sunni Muslims adopt qiyas as the fourth source of Islamic guidance. So it's the fourth source. We have the Quran, we have the Sunnah, we have ijma, and the fourth is qiyas. Qiyas means the Arab it's an Arabic word that is derived from the verb qasa, which means to guess, or to estimate something, or to measure something, to compare something. So in the language of the law, that is Islamic law, it is the art of bringing a branch of Sharia to its root because of the intimate resemblance between the root and the branch. So it is an extension of law. That is, for short, qiyas is human reasoning. Human reasoning. You can take a decision on your own when you reason about a particular issue, and it is not mentioned in the Quran, it is not mentioned in the Sunnah, it is not mentioned by the ulama through their consensus, which is ijma. Then you can now use your own personal reasoning. It's an extension of law from the original text. So based on what the Quran has said and the Sunnah of the Prophet has said, you may conclude, you may use qiyas to judge that case. So which will not contradict the Quran or the Sunnah or the ijma. So that is what is called qiyas. So in today's lesson, we have been able to explain the concise meaning, just the short meaning of Sunnah and Hadith. Then we also looked at the basis of Hadith and Sunnah in the Quran. Then we traced the meaning and definition of ijma and qiyas. So this is what we have for us in this presentation. So next week we'll continue by the grace of God. Thank you for listening.